What if the single greatest library of practical wisdom ever assembled had been sitting in plain sight for thousands of years, waiting for you to open it, read it slowly, and let its truths reshape the way you think, the way you speak, and the way you live every single day? What if the answers to your most pressing questions about relationships, about self-control, about the restless anxiety that follows you from morning to night, about the words you regret the moment they leave your mouth, about the thoughts that circle endlessly and exhaust you before the day even begins? What if all of those answers, or at least the most honest and enduring framework for finding them, had already been written down in a book that most people own but very few have truly read with the full attention it deserves? The book of Proverbs is that library. It is that framework. It is that treasury of divine wisdom that has guided kings and shaped nations and transformed the lives of ordinary men and women across every culture, every language, and every century since it was first committed to writing. And yet, for all its familiarity, for all the times people have quoted its verses on greeting cards and coffee mugs and motivational posters, it remains one of the most underestimated, underexplored books in all of Scripture. Because Proverbs does not comfort you before it challenges you. It does not flatter before it corrects. It does not offer you a feeling before it first demands a reckoning. And in a world that has become increasingly allergic to honest self-examination, that quality alone makes it among the most radical, countercultural, and desperately needed texts available to the human soul. Written primarily by Solomon, the son of David, the king whose legendary wisdom drew heads of state from across the ancient world to sit at his feet, and contributed to by other sages and wisdom teachers whose voices join his across its 31 chapters. Proverbs is not a theological treatise or a prophetic vision or a narrative history. It is something more intimate and more immediate than any of those. It is a direct address from wisdom itself to the person who is willing to stop, be quiet, and listen. It speaks to you about your own heart, your tendencies, your self-deceptions, your besetting habits, your hidden fears, and your unrealized potential. It speaks to you about your mouth, about the words you choose, the tone you carry, the moments when you speak when you should be silent, and the moments when your silence is a form of cowardice. And it speaks to you about the mind, about the thought patterns and beliefs and assumptions that are quietly, invisibly, relentlessly shaping the person you are becoming, one day at a time. The central message of Proverbs is stated in its opening chapter with a clarity that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Proverbs 1:7 declares, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Everything else in this extraordinary book flows from that single foundational truth. Wisdom does not begin in a university. It does not begin with talent or intelligence or the accumulation of life experience, though all of those have their place. It begins with the fear of the Lord, with a deep, reverent, life-orienting recognition that God is God, that His ways are higher than our ways, that His word is the final authority on every question that matters, and that a life built on that recognition is qualitatively, fundamentally different from a life built on anything else. This is not a comfortable starting point for a culture that has elevated self-trust and personal authenticity to the status of supreme virtues. But Proverbs has never been in the business of comfort for its own sake. It is in the business of transformation. And transformation, by definition, requires that some things change, that some patterns of thinking be disrupted, that some cherished assumptions be questioned, that some habits of speech be surrendered, and that some areas of the inner life that have been left unexamined for far too long finally be brought into the light and held up against the standard of divine wisdom. In this video, We're going to walk together through 40 of these sharp, life-altering secrets drawn from the book of Proverbs. 40 truths that speak directly to the mastery of the mind and the tongue. 40 lessons that have the power to transform not just how you feel about your life, but how you actually live it, one thought at a time and one word at a time. We will not skim the surface. We will not rush from verse to verse, collecting interesting observations to be forgotten by tomorrow. We are going to go deep because that is where the real treasure of Proverbs lives. That is where the wisdom that actually changes people's lives. These lessons are for the person who is tired of the same thought loops, the same relational conflicts, the same cycles of speaking and regretting. They are for the person who senses somewhere in the deeper parts of themselves that there is a better way to live, a cleaner, freer, more honest way of engaging with the world, but who has not yet found the map that leads there. Proverbs is that map. Not a perfect map, because no map is the territory, but a faithful and time-tested guide for the journey toward a life that is wise, purposeful, and genuinely free. So let us begin. Let us open this ancient treasury and let its secrets do what they have always done: illuminate, challenge, correct, and ultimately transform every person willing to receive them. Before we begin these 40 lessons, I want to pause for just a moment and speak to you directly. If you have found your way to this channel, if something about the way we open the Word of God here resonates with you and feeds something genuine in your spirit, I want to ask you warmly and earnestly to subscribe. Please take a moment right now, before we go any further, and hit that subscribe button. It is such a simple act, but it means so much. It tells me that what we are doing here is reaching you, that these words are landing somewhere real, and it helps this content find its way to more people who need exactly what you found here today. And I would love to know where in the world you are watching from right now. Please drop it in the comments. Your city, your country, your corner of the world. Every single time I read through those comments and see the places people are joining from cities across the United States and the United Kingdom, from communities across Africa and Asia and Latin America and Australia and beyond, I am genuinely moved. There is something holy and beautiful about the fact that we are all gathering here across all those time zones and distances and differences around the same Word of God. You are not watching this alone. You are part of a community of people who are choosing, in the middle of busy and complicated lives, to sit down with Scripture and let it speak. That community is real, and you belong to it. And if you want to go even deeper, if you want to become a true pillar of this community, to support what we are building here, and to receive early access to videos before they are released publicly, I warmly and sincerely invite you to become a channel member. The link is right there for you. Come join the inner circle. Let us walk this road together. And now, with great joy and expectation, let us turn to the book of Proverbs. Lesson 1. The fear of the Lord is the starting point of all genuine wisdom. Proverbs 1:7 states, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." We begin here because Proverbs begins here, and it does so deliberately. This is not a warm-up verse or an introductory pleasantry. This is the thesis of the entire book, the single truth upon which all 31 chapters rest, and from which all 40 of our lessons today ultimately draw their meaning and their power. To fear the Lord, as the Bible uses that phrase throughout the wisdom literature, is not primarily an emotional state of terror or dread. It is an orientation of the whole person, mind, will, heart, and daily behavior, toward the recognition that God is supremely real, supremely wise, supremely authoritative, and supremely worthy of the complete, unhesitating allegiance of every human being who has ever drawn breath. It is to live with a constant awareness that the God who created every galaxy and every molecule, who holds history in his hands and who knows the number of hairs on your head, is watching, caring, and acting, and that his word is therefore the most important voice in the room, in every situation, in every conversation, on every day of your life. When the fear of the Lord is genuinely the foundation of your life, everything built on top of it is different. Your decisions are different because the question you are asking is not merely, what do I want or what is advantageous to me, but what does God's wisdom say about this? Your speech is different because you are not simply asking what will go over well with the people in front of me, but what is true and what is right, and what honors the God who gave me a tongue to speak with. Your thought life is different because the standard against which you measure your inner world is not the shifting consensus of culture, but the unchanging character of God. The fool in Proverbs, and Proverbs has a great deal to say about the fool, none of it flattering, is not defined primarily by a low level of intelligence. The fool is the person who has dismissed or neglected or simply never seriously engaged with the fear of the Lord. The fool lives as though God is irrelevant, as though the moral order of the universe is negotiable, as though personal preference and immediate advantage are sufficient guides for navigating life. And the fruit of that foolishness, Proverbs shows us again and again with patient and sometimes devastating detail, is a life that collapses from the inside out. Begin here. Build on this. Whatever else you take from Proverbs, take this first and take it seriously. The fear of the Lord is not the conclusion of wisdom, it is the beginning of it. And until you have genuinely planted your life in that soil, everything else you build on top of it is resting on ground that will eventually give way. Lesson 2. Guard your heart as the origin of your entire life. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." Erdun, 4 words in this verse deserve to be held individually before we consider them together. Keep, heart, all, diligence. Keep, not merely notice, not simply be aware of, but actively guard, defend, protect, and tend. Heart, not the emotional sentiment we typically mean when we use that word, but the deep inner self, the center of thought and will and desire and imagination, the place where the real person lives beneath all the social performances and public presentations. All, not most, not the dramatic parts, not the obviously spiritual sections, but all. Diligence, not occasional attention, not seasonal effort, not the sporadic resolve that surges during moments of crisis and fades during seasons of ease, but consistent, ongoing, whole-life commitment. Out of the heart, out of this deep inner center of the human person, come the issues of life. The word issues here carries the sense of outflows, of what proceeds, of everything that emerges from a person into the world around them. Your words come from your heart. Your choices come from your heart. The patterns of your relationships, the quality of your work, the direction of your longings, the things that delight you and the things that repel you, the fears that paralyze you and the hopes that animate you. All of these are downstream from the heart. They are not random. They are the natural, logical outflow of what has been allowed to take root and grow in the inner self. This means that the single most high-leverage place of investment in your entire life is not your professional development, not your financial portfolio, not your physical fitness, not your social network, though all of these matter and all of them deserve your attention. The highest leverage point in your life is your heart. What are you feeding it? What voices are you consistently giving access to it? What images, what narratives, what beliefs, what desires are you allowing to put down roots in its soil? What have you allowed to grow there, unchecked, unexamined, unquestioned? What weeds have you been tolerating because pulling them out would be uncomfortable? Guarding the heart is not a passive posture. It is one of the most active, intentional, demanding disciplines available to a human being. It requires developing the habit of examining your own interior life honestly and regularly, without flinching from what you find. It requires having the courage to uproot things that have no place there and the discipline to consistently plant what does. It requires choosing day after day what you watch, what you listen to, what you rehearse in the privacy of your own thoughts, what stories you tell yourself about yourself and others and the world. These are not small choices. They are the choices from which every other choice in your life ultimately flows. Lesson 3. Lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5-6 reads, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." This may be the most memorized passage in the entire book of Proverbs, and it runs the risk that all frequently quoted verses run, of becoming so familiar that it stops being heard. So let us hear it as though for the first time, because what it is saying is genuinely radical, and its implications for the way we make decisions, navigate uncertainty, and engage with the complexity of daily life are far more demanding than the pleasant familiarity of the verse might suggest. Lean not unto thine own understanding. This is a direct, explicit instruction to resist the most natural and instinctive thing a thoughtful person does when facing a difficult situation, which is to trust their own analysis, their own conclusions, their own assessment of what is happening and what should be done about it. Proverbs is not saying that thinking carefully is wrong. It is not saying that reason and analysis have no place in the life of faith. Proverbs itself is a monument to careful, rigorous thinking about life and human nature. What it is saying is that your understanding, however careful, however informed, however intelligent, is limited, biased, partial, and capable of being catastrophically wrong, especially in the areas that matter most. The human capacity for self-deception is staggering. We rationalize. We construct elaborate justifications for what we were already determined to do. We select the evidence that supports our preferred conclusion and minimize or ignore the evidence that challenges it. We are convinced of our own objectivity at precisely the moments when we are most subjective. And we do all of this with complete sincerity, completely unaware of the extent to which our own desires, fears, and unexamined assumptions are driving our so-called reasoning. Trusting in the Lord with all your heart means bringing your analysis, your plans, your conclusions, and your convictions honestly before God. Genuinely open to the possibility that you might be wrong, genuinely willing to be corrected by His Word and His Spirit, genuinely committed to letting His wisdom override your preferences when the two are in conflict. Acknowledging God in all your ways means that there is no area of your life, no relationship, no financial decision, no professional choice, no area of personal behavior that you have cordoned off as private territory where God's input is not welcome. And the promise attached to this posture is breathtaking in its scope. He shall direct your paths, not some of your paths, not the big, dramatic, obviously spiritual ones, all of your paths. Lesson 4, Wisdom is calling. The question is whether you are listening. Proverbs 1:20-22 paints one of the most striking and unexpected images in the entire wisdom tradition. Wisdom crieth without. She uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief place of concourse, in the openings of the gates. In the city she uttereth her words, saying, How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. The image is startling, precisely because it subverts our instinctive assumptions about where wisdom is to be found. We tend to imagine wisdom as something hidden, tucked away in remote places, accessible only to the especially dedicated, available only after years of painstaking study or suffering or spiritual development. But Proverbs insists on something completely different. Wisdom is not hiding. She is not waiting to be found by those rare, privileged souls who stumble upon the right path. She is calling out, loudly, in the streets, in the city squares, at the gates where people gather in the normal, unremarkable flow of everyday life. The wisdom of God is woven into the fabric of creation, embedded in the testimony of Scripture, available through the community of faithful people who surround you, present in the quiet voice of conscience, accessible in the daily patterns of cause and effect that life consistently reveals to anyone paying attention. Wisdom speaks. She has always spoken. She is speaking right now, through this very text, through the experiences of your life that keep pointing toward the same lessons, through the people God has placed in your path, who embody the qualities you know you need to develop. The question, as Proverbs frames it, is not whether wisdom is available. It is why so many people consistently fail to receive it, and the answer the text gives is honest and uncomfortable. The simple love their simplicity. The scorners delight in their scorning. The fools hate knowledge. There are people who, when wisdom calls, turn away, not because they genuinely cannot hear her, but because receiving wisdom would require them to change, and changing is exactly what they have resolved not to do. The invitation stands open and urgent. The only question that remains is how you will respond to it. Lesson 5. Pride is not just a character flaw, it is a spiritual catastrophe. Proverbs 16:18 delivers what is arguably one of the most practically verified statements in the entire book. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. If you wanted to test the truth of this single verse against the record of human history, you would find the evidence overwhelming. The pattern it describes, the pattern of pride preceding catastrophic collapse, runs through the biographies of individuals, the histories of institutions, and the narratives of entire civilizations with a consistency that makes it look less like an occasional observation and more like a fundamental law of the moral universe. But why? What is it about pride that makes it so consistently, so reliably destructive? The answer lies in what pride actually does to the interior life of the person who harbors it. Pride closes the loop. It creates a self-referential system in which the proud person's own judgment becomes the final authority on every question. Their own perspective becomes the definitive view of every situation, and their own desires become the standard against which all outcomes are evaluated. Into this closed system, no genuine correction can enter, no honest warning can land, no call to reconsider, no evidence of error, no voice of genuine wisdom can penetrate the wall that pride erects around the self. And so the proud person continues down the path that pride has chosen, accumulating confidence as the path narrows until the moment arrives when narrowing becomes collapse. Destruction does not arrive without warning for the proud person. It arrives after many warnings that pride has systematically dismissed, minimized, or reframed as attacks to be defended against rather than truths to be received. The fall is the natural, inevitable endpoint of a journey that began when a person decided that their own understanding was sufficient and that correction from outside themselves was unnecessary. Examine your heart with genuine honesty. Where has pride settled in? Where do you find yourself consistently resistant to correction? Where does the possibility of being wrong produce in you not curiosity but defensiveness? Where has a high opinion of your own judgment quietly closed you off from the wisdom that might save you? These are among the most important questions that Proverbs invites you to sit with. and sitting with them with genuine honesty is itself an act of wisdom. Lesson 6. Your tongue carries the power of life and the power of death. Proverbs 18:21 makes a statement so direct and so absolute that it is worth reading slowly and sitting with fully before moving on. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Death and life, not minor social consequences, not the relatively manageable outcomes of good or poor communication. Death and life. The full, stark, ultimate binary of human experience, and Proverbs places both of them squarely within the domain of the tongue. Consider what this means. Every time you open your mouth to speak, you are exercising a power that Proverbs describes in the most consequential possible terms. The word you speak to the child, who is still forming their understanding of their own worth and value, that word has the power of life and the power of death in it, and that child will carry it long after you have forgotten saying it. The word you speak to the friend who is on the edge of a decision that will shape the next decade of their life. That word has power in it that neither of you can fully measure in the moment. The word you speak about yourself, in the private conversation of your own inner life, that word too is either sowing life or sowing death into the soil of your own soul. This is not hyperbole. This is the sober, considered assessment of one of the wisest human beings who ever lived, writing under the inspiration of God, and it demands a response that goes beyond simply trying to be more polite or more careful in casual conversation. It demands a thoroughgoing transformation of the relationship between your heart and your mouth, a transformation that begins with taking the power of speech with the seriousness it deserves. Words are not just sounds. They are not just the expression of what is already true. They participate in the creation of reality. They shape the world they describe. They plant seeds in human hearts that grow into trees of life or trees of destruction long after the moment of speaking has passed. Lesson 7. A gentle answer changes the direction of a conflict. Proverbs 15:1 teaches, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." The genius of this proverb is in its simplicity. It does not require a complex analysis to understand what it is saying. But its application requires a level of emotional discipline that most people find genuinely difficult, precisely because the moments when it most needs to be applied are the moments when every instinct in the human body is screaming in exactly the opposite direction. When someone speaks to you with harshness, when someone raises their voice, when someone's words carry the sting of accusation or the heat of contempt, the entire nervous system responds in a way that is specifically designed to generate a reciprocal intensity. Meet fire with fire, match energy with energy, defend with equal or greater force. This is not a character flaw. It is a biological response system that has been part of human beings for as long as there have been human beings. The problem is not that you feel it. The problem arises when you allow it to determine your response without any intervention from wisdom. The soft answer is not the weak answer. It is the answer that requires more strength than the forceful one, because it demands that you override a powerful biological impulse in favor of a considered, intentional response. The person who can speak softly when provoked is not someone who lacks conviction or backbone. They are someone who has developed sufficient self-mastery to choose their response rather than simply react. And the effect of that choice, Proverbs tells us, is to turn away wrath, to change the trajectory of the conversation, to introduce a different energy into a heated exchange, to create the possibility of resolution where escalation seemed inevitable. This is one of the most practically transformative lessons in all of Proverbs. Practice it in the next difficult conversation you have. Notice what happens when, instead of matching the other person's intensity, you deliberately lower your voice, soften your tone, and choose words that open rather than close. The result will often surprise you, not because the other person becomes instantly reasonable. They may not, but because you will have demonstrated a quality of self-command that is genuinely rare and genuinely powerful. Lesson 8. Your plans belong to you, but the direction belongs to God. Proverbs 16:1 says, "The preparations of the heart in man and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord." And then Proverbs 16:9 adds, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps." These two verses together create one of the most beautifully balanced theological statements in all of Scripture, a statement about the relationship between human initiative and divine sovereignty that avoids both the paralysis of fatalism and the hubris of self-sufficiency. You plan. You prepare. You think things through with care and intention and effort. You are not called to passive resignation or spiritual laziness or the abdication of thoughtful planning under the guise of trusting God. Proverbs nowhere encourages a posture of simply waiting for God to act while you sit still. The human side of the equation, the preparation of the heart, the devising of the way, is real and it matters. Your effort, your wisdom, your intentionality in thinking through how to live and what to pursue and how to approach the decisions before you, all of this is valued and expected. But the direction of your steps, the actual outcome, the final destination, the way your words land at the crucial moment, the door that opens or closes on a particular path, this belongs to God. The Lord directs your steps. Not because your steps don't matter, but because the God who sees the full picture, who holds the whole story in his hands, who knows the end from the beginning, and whose purposes are worked out through the choices of free human beings in ways that are far too complex for any human mind to fully trace, that God is actively, sovereignly, lovingly involved in the direction of a life that is submitted to him. This is the partnership that Proverbs describes. Plan well, prepare carefully, think deeply, and then hold your plans with open hands, genuinely willing for God to redirect, or even completely overturn what you had intended, trusting that his direction, even when it surprises or disappoints you, is always wiser and ultimately better than the path you had charted for yourself. Lesson 9. The right word at the right moment is a work of art. Proverbs 25:11 says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. Pause and let the image breathe." Golden apples set against a silver backdrop, a picture of beauty so exquisite that the visual metaphor itself communicates something that a purely conceptual description could not. Proverbs is not simply saying that well-timed words are nice or helpful. It is saying that they are beautiful. That there is something aesthetic and magnificent about the precise convergence of the right truth, the right tone, the right moment, and the right listener. That when all of these come together, the result is not merely effective communication, but something that rises to the level of art. What makes a word fitly spoken? First, truth. The word must carry genuine substance, genuine insight, genuine accuracy. A beautiful lie is still a lie, and Proverbs has no patience for that. But truth alone is not sufficient. Timing is essential. Truth delivered at the wrong moment, regardless of how accurate or well-intentioned it is, can land like an assault rather than a gift. The person who is in acute crisis does not primarily need a theological lecture. They need presence and compassion and words that communicate that they are not alone. The person who has just made an irreversible decision does not primarily need a detailed analysis of why it was the wrong one. They need wisdom for navigating the path they are now on. Tone matters as much as content. The same truth can be delivered with warmth, or with coldness, with compassion, or with condescension, with the gentleness of someone who genuinely wishes good for the listener, or with the edge of someone who is more interested in being right than in being helpful. The person who has developed the wisdom to attend to all of these dimensions simultaneously, what to say, when to say it, how to say it, to whom, is the person whose words become apples of gold. This is not a skill that is acquired quickly. It is formed over a lifetime of attentiveness, humility, and genuine care for the people you speak to, but it is worth every bit of the effort it requires. Lesson 10. Do not boast about what tomorrow will bring. Proverbs 27:1 cautions, "Boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth." There is a particular kind of arrogance that modern life tends to normalize. The arrogance of assumed continuity, of presumed permanence, of treating the future as a territory that already belongs to us simply because we have the capacity to imagine it. We speak of future plans as though they are already accomplished. We defer the important things to a future moment that may not come. We boast about what we are going to do, what we are going to build, what we are going to achieve, what we are going to say, as though tomorrow has already signed a contract guaranteeing its arrival on the terms we have specified. Proverbs does not say this to fill you with existential dread or to paralyze you with the unpredictability of life. It says it to deliver you from the particular kind of foolishness that lives in presumption, the foolishness that defers repentance, defers reconciliation, defers the risk of obedience, defers the generosity that could be offered today, defers the relationship that needs tending right now, all in favor of a tomorrow that is entirely at the disposal of God, not you. There is also a more subtle form of the boasting this verse warns against, the social performance of future achievement that is really about managing how others perceive us in the present. We talk about what we are going to do, partly because talking about it gives us some of the feeling of having already done it, without requiring the actual cost of doing it. Proverbs sees through this with its characteristic directness. You do not know what a day will bring. Live in today with the fullness of your attention, your effort, your love, and your obedience. Do the good that today gives you the opportunity to do, and let tomorrow remain in the hands where it has always properly belonged. Lesson 11. You are what you consistently think in your heart. Proverbs 23:7 contains one of the most quoted and least fully digested lines in all of wisdom literature. For as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. 7 words. And yet these 7 words carry an insight about human nature that entire fields of psychology, philosophy, and spiritual formation have spent generations exploring, confirming, and learning to apply. You are not simply what you do. You are not even primarily what you feel. You are, at the deepest and most formative level, what you consistently think. The thought life is not a private room that exists in sealed separation from your public self. It is the workshop in which your public self is being continuously manufactured. Every belief you hold about your own worth shapes the way you carry yourself in relationships. Every assumption you make about the intentions of others shapes the quality of connection you are able to experience. Every story you rehearse about your own limitations shapes the risks you are willing to take and the opportunities you will walk past without recognizing them. Every narrative you tell yourself about what is possible, about what God is doing, about whether you are loved and known and valued, these narratives are not merely descriptions of your life. They are, in a very real sense, the engine of it. This is one of the reasons why Proverbs invests so heavily in the theme of guarding the heart. Not because emotion is dangerous or because feelings should be suppressed, but because the heart, the deep center of thought and belief and desire, is where the real work of formation is happening, whether we are attending to it or not. The person who brings their thought life under the discipline of wisdom, who chooses to rehearse truth rather than fear, gratitude rather than resentment, faith rather than despair, that person is, slowly and cumulatively, becoming someone different. Someone more resilient, someone more free, someone whose public life increasingly reflects the quality of their private thoughts. Lesson 12. Iron sharpens iron. Your relationships are forming you. Proverbs 27:17 offers a compact and vivid image that communicates a truth of enormous practical importance. Iron sharpeneth iron, so a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. Two pieces of iron, neither soft, neither yielding. When they come into contact, there is friction. And it is that friction, not comfort, not agreement, not smooth, frictionless interaction, that produces the sharpness. This is not incidental to the metaphor. It is the whole point of it. The relationships that actually make you wiser, sharper, more truthful, more self-aware, and more capable of living well are not primarily the ones that are always pleasant. They are the ones with enough substance, enough honesty, and enough mutual commitment to truth that they can generate the productive friction of genuine challenge. This means relationships with people who love you enough to say the things that are hard to hear, people who respect you enough to disagree with you honestly rather than managing you with comfortable agreement. People whose lives and character set a standard that pulls you upward, that makes you want to grow, that refuses to let you remain comfortably settled in your current limitations. We live in a culture that has made comfort the primary criterion for the quality of a relationship, that evaluates friendships by how good they make us feel rather than by who they are making us become. Proverbs offers a different standard entirely. The best friend is not the one who always agrees with you. The best friend is the one who makes you sharper, and being made sharper requires friction, not the friction of contempt or cruelty or conflict for its own sake, but the honest, respectful, truth-telling friction of two people who are both committed to something more important than each other's comfort. Look at the relationships closest to you. Are they making you more iron, or are they leaving you soft? Lesson 13. The lips of the wise are a shield against harm. Proverbs 14:3 observes, "In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them." Pride makes the fool's mouth into a weapon, an instrument that strikes out at others, that provokes, that damages, that creates enemies with every conversation, and accumulates the kind of relational debt that eventually comes due in the worst possible circumstances. The foolish person speaks without counting the cost, without considering the lasting impression their words are making, without attending to the trail of broken trust and wounded feeling and simmering resentment that their words leave behind them. But the lips of the wise preserve them. This is an image of protection, of a kind of relational capital that is built slowly and maintained carefully through the consistent practice of truthful, kind, measured, and trustworthy speech. The wise person's words create around them a network of goodwill, trust, and genuine affection that functions as a buffer when life becomes difficult. When the wise person faces adversity, people rally to their support because those people have been consistently treated well. When the wise person needs to be given the benefit of the doubt, it is extended readily because their track record has earned it. Your speech is either building this kind of relational shelter or tearing it down. Every conversation is an investment or a withdrawal in the account of trust that determines whether you have the support and goodwill of others when you genuinely need it. This is not a cynical calculation. Wise speech is not primarily about strategic investment for future personal benefit, but the observation that wisdom in speech creates protection and foolishness in speech creates vulnerability is simply an honest description of how human community actually works. Lesson 14. Dishonesty is an abomination to the God of truth. Proverbs 6:16-19 lists 7 things that the Lord hates, calling them abominations. At the top of the list, a proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. The lying tongue sits in the company of murder and malice, which gives you a sense of how seriously the wisdom literature of Scripture takes the question of honest speech. This is not the casual moralism of a culture that simply finds dishonesty inconvenient. This is the declaration of a God for whom truth is not merely a useful social convention, but an expression of his own nature and character. God is truth. This is not a metaphorical statement. It means that at the deepest level of ultimate reality, there is no gap between what is and what is said. No distance between the word and the thing it describes. No manipulation, no spin, no half-truth, no strategic omission. God's speech perfectly corresponds to reality because he is the creator and sustainer of reality. When human beings choose to lie, when they choose to create a false impression, whether through direct falsehood or through technically accurate but deliberately misleading speech, they are acting directly contrary to the image in which they were created. The practical consequences of habitual dishonesty are equally serious. Trust, once broken, is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. The person who has earned a reputation for dishonesty finds that their words are received with skepticism, even when they are telling the truth. They discover that the relational credit they spent on deception is not easily replenished. And beyond the relational cost, there is an interior cost that may be even more significant. The chronic liar gradually loses the ability to see clearly, because they have trained themselves to construct and inhabit versions of reality that serve their immediate interests rather than accurately describing what is. Clean speech, honest speech, speech that consistently means what it says and says what it means. This is a form of spiritual discipline with consequences that reach far beyond any individual conversation. Lesson 15. The tongue of the wise brings genuine healing. Proverbs 12:18 draws a contrast as sharp as any in the book. There is that speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. Reckless speech wounds, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Recklessly spoken words leave real wounds in real people that sometimes take years to heal, and sometimes leave scars that never fully disappear. The person who grew up hearing that they were stupid carries that wound into every intellectual challenge they face as an adult. The person who was told they were unlovable carries that wound into every intimate relationship they attempt. The person who was shamed, publicly and carelessly, often carries that shame like a weight that shapes every subsequent choice they make about risk and vulnerability. Careless speech does this. Not always with malicious intent, often with no real intent at all, in moments of impatience or frustration or thoughtlessness, by people who have long since forgotten what they said, and would be genuinely shocked to learn the depth of the damage they left behind. This is what Proverbs means when it says that some speech is like the piercing of a sword. Swords do not distinguish between the wounds they intend and the ones they accidentally inflict. And neither sometimes does a careless tongue, but the tongue of the wise is health. This is an extraordinary promise. Not merely that wise speech avoids doing harm, but that it actively produces healing. There are words that lift people, words that restore dignity that has been trampled, words that speak truth into the darkest corners of a person's self-perception and push back against the lies they have been told about themselves. Words that come at precisely the right moment and say precisely the right thing and change, in an instant, the trajectory of what someone believed was possible for them. This is the healing tongue. Aspire to it with everything you have. Lesson 16. Without vision, life loses its coherence and its direction. Proverbs 29:18 declares, "Where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he." The word translated vision in this verse carries a specific meaning in its original context. It refers to prophetic revelation, to the living word of God as the guiding truth for a community. When a people lose their connection to God's revealed truth, when they drift from the anchor of His word and His instruction, they do not simply become less religious, they begin to unravel at the very fabric of their common life. Without the North Star of divine wisdom orienting their collective choices and shaping their shared values, they lose the coherence that makes genuine community possible and the direction that makes purposeful living possible. The personal application of this principle is equally powerful and equally urgent. When you lose your sense of divine purpose, when the question of what God is calling you to be and do and build with your one singular life stops being a question you are actively pursuing, something essential begins to die inside you. Not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that immediately announces itself as a crisis, but quietly. A slow drift away from clarity, from motivation, from the sense that your days have weight and meaning and direction. You begin to make decisions based purely on what is immediately comfortable or immediately available, rather than on what is genuinely calling you forward. Reconnect with vision. Not vision as a corporate strategy or a personal brand, but vision as a genuine, prayerfully sought sense of God's calling on your life, where He is taking you, what He is shaping you to do and be, what legacy He is asking you to build with the gifts and time and relationships He has entrusted to you. Let that vision govern your daily choices with the discipline and focus of someone who knows exactly what they are moving toward and why. Lesson 17. The discerning heart actively seeks and accumulates knowledge. Proverbs 18:15 says, "The heart of the prudent getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge." Two active verbs, gets, seeks. The pursuit of wisdom in Proverbs is never passive. It is never the posture of someone who sits still and waits for wisdom to find them. It is always the posture of someone who is actively, persistently, and intentionally moving toward knowledge, pursuing understanding, positioning themselves consistently in the kinds of relationships, conversations, and learning environments where wisdom is likely to be found. Notice the specific mention of the ear. The ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Listening is the primary mode of learning, and it is a discipline that runs directly against the grain of a culture that has elevated the expression of opinion far above the reception of it. We live in an age of unprecedented noise, an age in which every person with an internet connection has a platform, in which the volume of available content has long since exceeded any individual's capacity to process it meaningfully, in which the pressure to have an opinion and to express it loudly and immediately has never been greater. Into this noise, Proverbs speaks a quiet but insistent counter-instruction. Learn to listen. Develop the discipline of seeking to understand before seeking to be understood. Train your ear to move toward wisdom rather than simply toward whatever is entertaining or affirming in the moment. The heart of the prudent accumulates knowledge the way a careful farmer accumulates grain, gathering it steadily, storing it with care, building up reserves that will sustain both themselves and others through seasons of difficulty. What are you storing in the granary of your mind? Is it the kind of knowledge that will serve you and those around you when life demands wisdom, or is it simply noise that entertains in the moment and leaves nothing lasting behind? Lesson 18. Gossip is a demolition tool for human community. Proverbs 17:9 warns, "He that covereth a transgression seeketh love, but he that repeateth a matter separateth very friends." And Proverbs 20:19 adds, "He that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips." Proverbs returns to the subject of gossip with a frequency and a directness that suggests Solomon considered it among the most significant threats to the health of human community. And the more closely you examine how communities actually break apart, the more you begin to understand why. Gossip is insidious precisely because it feels like the opposite of what it is. It feels like connection. When you share information about a third party with another person, there is a genuine warmth of intimacy that is generated, a sense of shared knowledge, shared perspective, shared judgment. This is why gossip is so socially appealing. It produces a feeling of closeness, a feeling of being inside the circle of those who know. But the intimacy it creates is counterfeit because it is built at the expense of someone who is not present and has not consented to being the subject of the conversation. And the connection it forges is built on a foundation that both parties know at some level to be unreliable. Because if this person will talk about others with you, they will also talk about you with others. Covering a transgression, by contrast, choosing discretion over disclosure, forgiveness over exposure, the protection of another's dignity over the social reward of being the person who knows the story, is described by Proverbs as an act of love. It is the refusal to allow someone's failure to become the currency of your social exchange. It is one of the most countercultural practices available to someone who has genuinely received wisdom, and it is one of the most powerful builders of genuine, lasting trust. Lesson 19. A joyful heart is its own medicine. Proverbs 17:22 declares, "A merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones." Centuries before the fields of psychoneuroimmunology and mind-body medicine began documenting the measurable physiological effects of emotional states on physical health, Proverbs was saying exactly what those fields have since confirmed. The interior climate of the human heart has direct, concrete effects on the physical body. A merry heart, not a forced cheerfulness, not the hollow brightness of someone performing happiness they do not feel, but the deep, anchored, genuine joy that comes from knowing that you are held and loved and guided by a God who is working all things together for good. This quality of heart does something medicinal to the person who carries it. It does not eliminate suffering. Proverbs is not promising that joyful people do not face illness or loss or hardship. It is making a more subtle and more profound observation that the interior quality of joy, the spiritual vitality that expresses itself as genuine delight in life and genuine trust in God, sustains and nourishes the whole person, body included, in ways that cannot be fully replicated by any external remedy. Conversely, a broken spirit drains life. Chronic bitterness, unprocessed grief, sustained anxiety, the persistent weight of hopelessness, these do not stay neatly contained in the emotional register. They seep into the physical, the relational, and the spiritual, diminishing the whole person with a thoroughness that confirms Proverbs' point about the deep integration of the human self. Pursue joy. Not the shallow, circumstance-dependent version that the world offers, but the robust, anchored, rooted joy of someone whose trust is in the Lord. It will do more for your well-being, your whole well-being, than almost anything else available to you. Lesson 20. Generosity increases and hoarding decreases. Proverbs 11:24-25 contains a statement that upends the scarcity logic that drives so much of human behavior regarding money and resources. There is that scattereth, and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself. Aye, the generous person who scatters, who gives freely, who holds their resources loosely, who is quick to help and slow to calculate the personal cost of generosity, this is the person who increases. The person who withholds, who hoards, who calculates every outflow with an anxious grip. This is the person who tends toward poverty. This is not a financial formula or a prosperity gospel. Proverbs is not promising that every generous person will become financially wealthy, or that every stingy person will inevitably end up destitute. It is making a deeper observation about the spiritual and relational economy of a life oriented toward generosity versus a life oriented toward self-protection. The generous person creates around themselves an atmosphere of abundance, not because they have more, but because they are oriented toward giving rather than taking, toward others rather than self. They participate in a flow of grace that returns to them in forms that cannot always be measured in financial terms, but that constitute a genuine richness of life. And the watering principle is simply beautiful. He that watereth shall be watered also himself. The person who consistently invests in the flourishing of others, who pours encouragement, time, resources, and care into the lives around them, discovers that the same generosity they have extended tends to return to them, often from unexpected directions, when they find themselves in genuine need. This is not karma. It is the observed pattern of a universe whose creator is himself the most extravagant giver of all. Lesson 21. Pleasant words are nourishment for the body and the soul. Proverbs 16:24 paints a picture that lingers in the imagination long after you have read it. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. Every element of this image is doing careful work. The honeycomb is not merely sweet in the momentary superficial sense of something enjoyable. It is nourishing. It carries substance. The sweetness of honey is the sweetness of something that actually feeds you, that provides genuine energy and sustenance, not merely a pleasant sensation that fades immediately. And Proverbs says that pleasant words carry this quality. They are not just nice to hear, they are nourishing to the soul and health-giving to the bones. Think about the most life-giving conversations you have ever had. The ones that left you feeling genuinely energized rather than drained. The ones that gave you something to carry forward, a renewed sense of possibility, a clarity about something that had been confusing you, an awareness of being genuinely seen and valued. These are the conversations of pleasant words. And the people who consistently produce these conversations are people whose hearts have been genuinely shaped by wisdom, because pleasant words in the Proverbs sense are not primarily a communication technique. They are the natural outflow of a heart that genuinely wishes good for others, that delights in their flourishing, that has been trained by wisdom to see people with clarity and to speak to them with both truth and grace. Aspire to be this person, not through technique, but through transformation. Ask God to give you a heart that genuinely loves the people you speak with, genuinely delights in their well-being, genuinely wants your words to nourish rather than deplete. When that kind of heart is the source, pleasant words follow naturally. Lesson 22. True discipline is the highest form of love. Proverbs 13:24 states, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes." This verse has been controversial in various contexts, and it is worth pausing to understand what it is actually saying at the level of its deepest principle, which is this. Genuine love is not primarily concerned with the comfort of the beloved in the present moment. It is primarily concerned with the character and the flourishing of the beloved over the long arc of their life. And sometimes, maybe often, the path toward that long-term flourishing runs directly through short-term discomfort. The discipline Proverbs describes is always in the service of formation, never in the service of the discipliner's frustration or the need to exert control. It is correction directed toward a better future, not punishment expressing a present anger. And the terrible thing that Proverbs says about the parent who refuses all correction, who cannot bear to see their child experience any difficulty or disappointment, who always smooths the path and removes all friction, is that this is not love. It is a form of neglect disguised as affection. It is the prioritizing of your own emotional comfort, your desire not to see your child unhappy, not to endure the conflict of correction, over the long-term good of the child you claim to love. The same principle applies to self-discipline with equal force. The person who loves themselves enough to correct their own patterns, to identify their own destructive habits and bring them under the discipline of wisdom, to endure the discomfort of growth, to submit their impulses to the authority of what they know to be right rather than what feels good in the moment. This person is practicing the highest form of self-love available to a human being. Not comfort. Formation. That is the love that Proverbs is describing. Lesson 23. The wise person does not empty their mind through their mouth. Proverbs 29:11 delivers a verdict as quietly devastating as any in the book. A fool uttereth all his mind, but a wise man keepeth it in till afterwards. We have constructed, in the contemporary moment, a cultural theology around the virtue of radical self-expression. The idea that to withhold any thought or feeling is somehow inauthentic. That full transparency at all times is a mark of genuine intimacy. That the unfiltered expression of whatever is currently occupying your inner world is both your right and, in some quarters, your moral obligation. Proverbs has not read that theology, and it is not persuaded by it. The fool empties their mind through their mouth. Every frustration is immediately voiced. Every reaction is immediately expressed. Every judgment is immediately communicated. And the result is a life littered with the wreckage of unconsidered speech. Conflicts that need not have happened, wounds that need not have been inflicted, confidences that need not have been betrayed, impressions that need not have been given. The fool does not lack for things to say. The problem is that they have never developed the discernment to distinguish between what they think and feel and what is genuinely worth saying. The wise person keeps it in until afterwards. This is not permanent silence. It is not the suppression of honest communication in favor of a permanent performance of composure. It is the discipline of the pause, the space between stimulus and response in which wisdom has the opportunity to evaluate, to filter, to consider timing and tone, and the actual purpose of the words being contemplated. What is the goal of what I am about to say? Who will it actually serve? Is this the right moment? Is this the right tone? Will I be glad I said this tomorrow? These are the questions that wisdom asks in the pause. They are among the most transformative questions available to a human being. Lesson 24. Laziness is a choice with unavoidable consequences. Proverbs 6:6-11 invites the lazy person to consider an unlikely teacher. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travelleth, and thy want as an armed man. The ant has no manager, no accountability structure, no external system of rewards and penalties that compels it to work. It works because it understands the relationship between present effort and future provision, because it has the wisdom to act in summer against the reality of winter, because it does not require permission or supervision or the immediate presence of reward to stay consistently engaged with its purpose. Proverbs holds this up as an image of wisdom in action. The warning about laziness is delivered without sentimentality or softening. Poverty will come. Not might, not could, will. It comes with the certainty of a traveler arriving, and the force of an armed man, inevitable and irresistible. There is no moralizing about the character of the lazy person beyond this simple, observable connection between the choices of the present and the conditions of the future. What you consistently choose to do or not do in the ordinary days is not morally neutral. It is seed being sown, and the harvest will come according to what was planted, with the patient precision of natural law. Lesson 25. Deferred hope is a real and serious pain. Proverbs 13:12 speaks with a depth of emotional honesty that sets it apart from almost every other verse in the book. Hope deferred maketh the heart sick, but when the desire cometh, it is a tree of life. There is no easy comfort here. There is no theological bypass around the genuine anguish of waiting for something that keeps not arriving. Proverbs acknowledges plainly without flinching that prolonged disappointment produces a real and genuine sickness of the heart, a draining away of vitality and hope that has nothing theoretical about it. This is a verse for the person who has prayed the same prayer for years with no visible answer, for the person who has waited for a promise that has not yet been fulfilled, for the person who knows what it is to carry the weight of hope that has been strained almost to the point of breaking. Do not rush past that first half of the verse to get to the comfort. Sit with it. Proverbs is telling you that your pain in waiting is legitimate, that the sickness of a deferred hope is real, that God's word does not dismiss or minimize the cost of a long obedience in the wrong direction of apparent fruitlessness. Your grief over what has not yet come is not a lack of faith. It is the honest expression of a heart that desires what God has placed within it to desire. And then the second half. When the desire comes, it is a tree of life, not a small plant or a brief comfort or a temporary relief, a tree, something deep-rooted, substantial, shade-giving, fruit-bearing, and enduring. The thing that has been awaited through the long season of sickness will, when it arrives, carry a life and a depth and a sweetness that could only be produced by the waiting that preceded it. Hold on. Lesson 26. The company you keep is shaping the person you are becoming. Proverbs 13:20 states a principle that is simple enough to understand in a moment and demanding enough to take a lifetime to fully live. He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed. The people you spend the most time with are not neutral. They are not simply the backdrop against which your real life unfolds. They are among the most powerful formative influences on the person you are becoming, on your values, your habits of speech and thought, your sense of what is normal and what is possible, your emotional and spiritual vocabulary, your aspirations and your fears. We absorb each other. This happens with or without our conscious awareness, through 1,000 small interactions over time. The way a conversation partner consistently frames problems, the things they laugh at and the things they take seriously, the level of ambition and the quality of character they embody in the daily flow of shared life. Iron sharpens iron when the companions are both sharp. But the reverse is equally true. Extended exposure to foolishness has a corrosive effect on wisdom, because human beings are social creatures whose internal standards are constantly being calibrated against the standards of those around them. This does not mean surrounding yourself exclusively with perfect people or withdrawing from those who struggle. Wisdom is not a form of social elitism. But it does mean being honest, genuinely honest, not defensively, about who is influencing you most and in which direction. It means being intentional about pursuing relationships with people who are further along the path of wisdom than you are. because those relationships will pull you forward, and it means being vigilant about the gradual, subtle, normalizing effect of habitual proximity to foolishness. Lesson 27. A good name is the wealth that outlasts every fortune. Proverbs 22:1 states, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches, and loving favor rather than silver and gold." In the ranking of values that Proverbs consistently maintains throughout the book, character and reputation, a good name, stand above wealth with a clarity that leaves no room for misunderstanding. This is not because Proverbs is naive about the practical usefulness of money. The book has a great deal of sensible and realistic things to say about financial wisdom, about the importance of diligence and saving, and the dangers of both poverty and wealth. But when it comes to the question of ultimate priority, the choice is unambiguous. Choose a good name. What is a good name? It is the reputation built slowly and maintained faithfully through 1,000 small choices made in the direction of integrity, through the consistent refusal to shade the truth when a more convenient version would have been easier to tell, through the habit of keeping promises even when keeping them is costly, through the practice of treating people with the same fairness and respect, whether they are in a position to reward or punish your behavior toward them. A good name cannot be purchased or manufactured or managed into existence through clever public relations. It can only be earned the slow way, through the patient accumulation of a character that has proven itself trustworthy over time. And the value of that name, when it has been genuinely earned, exceeds any financial wealth in at least one crucial respect. It endures. Money can be lost in a moment through market collapse or fraud or illness or any number of forces beyond your control. But a good name, once earned through genuine integrity, remains yours even when everything else is stripped away. And the doors that a good name opens, the trust it commands, the relationships it creates, the influence it quietly extends, are among the most durable and valuable assets available to any human being. Lesson 28. The fear of man is the prison most people don't recognize they are in. Proverbs 29:25 warns, "The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe." The fear of man is not primarily the fear of physical harm from another person. It is the far more common, far more socially normalized anxiety about what other people think, the compulsive monitoring of perception, the desperate need for approval, the terror of rejection or disapproval that causes people to contort themselves into shapes designed to please the room rather than to honor God or live with genuine integrity. It is the force that causes people to say things they do not believe, to leave unsaid things that need to be spoken, to make choices they know are wrong because the social cost of the right choice feels too high. Proverbs calls it a snare, a trap. Not because the desire for genuine human connection and community approval is itself wrong, but because the fear of man, when it becomes the governing force in your life, is incompatible with genuine wisdom, genuine courage, and genuine freedom. You cannot simultaneously be ruled by what others think of you and walk in the full liberty of a person whose identity is secure in God. The two are mutually exclusive. Every time the fear of man wins, every time you stay silent when you should speak, or agree when you should push back, or perform a version of yourself designed to manage others' perceptions rather than simply being who you actually are. That fear is strengthening its hold and the snare is tightening. The antidote is the fear of God. When the most important question in any situation becomes not what will these people think of me, but what does God think of this? When His pleasure, His assessment of your choices, His evaluation of your character becomes the primary audience you are playing to, the fear of man loses its power with remarkable swiftness. You are safe not because other people suddenly approve of you, but because the only approval that ultimately matters is the one you already have in Christ. Lesson 29. Character is revealed in action, not in claim. Proverbs 20:11 states with a simplicity that is almost disarming, "Even a child is known by his doings, whether his work be pure and whether it be right." Character is not what you say about yourself. It is not what you intend or aspire to or believe yourself to be in the ideal version of yourself that you carry around in your own mind. Character is what you consistently do, the choices you make when the choice is genuinely difficult, the person you are in private when no one is evaluating your performance, the way you treat people who have nothing to offer you and who will never be in a position to reward your goodness toward them. Even a child is known by their doings. This is not a statement about the maturity or the self-awareness of the child. It is a statement about the transparency of behavior as a window into character. What a person consistently does reveals who they genuinely are, regardless of how articulately they can describe who they would like to be. This is both a warning and an encouragement. The warning is that your actions are communicating your character constantly to God and to the people around you, whether you intend them to or not. No amount of carefully curated self-presentation can permanently conceal what is actually being revealed in the ordinary choices of daily life. The encouragement is equally significant. You have the power to change your character through the practice of consistent right action. Character is not fate. It is not fixed and immovable. It is formed by habits, and habits can be changed through patient, consistent, deliberate choice in the direction of wisdom. Every time you choose honesty when deception would have been easier, every time you choose generosity when withholding would have been more comfortable, every time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you are doing the slow, cumulative work of character formation, and that work will show. Lesson 30. The trap of the wicked is built from their own words. Proverbs 12:13 observes, "The wicked is snared by the transgression of his lips, but the just shall come out of trouble." There is a pattern in human experience that Proverbs identifies and names with its characteristic directness. The person who uses speech dishonestly, manipulatively, or maliciously is not merely creating trouble for others. They are building, with every dishonest word, the trap in which they themselves will eventually be caught. The lie that was meant to provide cover creates a complication that requires another lie to manage, and then another to manage that one, until the whole architecture of deception becomes so complex and so fragile that any honest examination threatens to bring the entire structure down. This is not poetic justice in some abstract sense. It is the observed reality of how dishonest speech actually works in the world. The person whose speech is trustworthy, whose yes means yes and whose no means no, who says what they mean and means what they say. This person has nothing to maintain, nothing to defend, and very little to fear from scrutiny. When they encounter difficulty, they come out of it. Their integrity is a kind of buoyancy that surfaces them through trouble that would drown someone burdened by the weight of maintained deception. The freedom of honest living is one of the most underestimated freedoms available to a human being. It is the freedom of the clear conscience, of having nothing to conceal, nothing to defend, no version of events to keep consistent. Every act of honest speech is an investment in that freedom. Every act of dishonest speech is a payment toward the construction of a prison whose walls are your own words. Lesson 31. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent is its own wisdom. Proverbs 26:4-5 presents one of the most fascinating apparent paradoxes in the entire wisdom tradition. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit. Read consecutively. These two verses appear to give directly contradictory advice, and the rabbinical tradition has wrestled with this tension for centuries. But Proverbs is not contradicting itself. It is being remarkably, almost modernly sophisticated about the contextual nature of wisdom in speech. There are moments when engaging a foolish argument, entering into its premises, fighting on its own terms, taking it seriously enough to construct a detailed refutation, achieves nothing useful, and in fact lends the foolishness a dignity and seriousness it does not deserve. In those moments, to answer is to become in some measure like the fool, because you have allowed the fool's framework to set the terms of the exchange. Silence or strategic disengagement is the wiser choice. But there are other moments when a foolish argument left unanswered will simply confirm the fool in their conceit, when the silence of wisdom will be misread as agreement or inability, and when the community that is watching needs to see the foolishness named and refuted so that it does not take root more widely. In those moments, to remain silent is itself a form of complicity. The wisdom is in knowing which situation you are in. Not every argument deserves a response. Not every foolishness can be safely left unchallenged. The person who has developed the discernment to know the difference has mastered one of the most practically useful skills in the entire domain of human speech. Lesson 32. Commit your work to God and watch your mind. Come to peace. Proverbs 16:3 offers a promise that sounds deceptively simple and proves to be profoundly transformative in practice. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. The word translated commit here, carries the ancient sense of rolling something over. Physically, the image is of rolling a burden off your own shoulders and onto someone else's. When you commit your works to the Lord, you are not simply saying a prayer over your plans and then carrying them with the same anxious grip as before. You are genuinely releasing the outcome, rolling the weight of result and consequence off your own shoulders and onto the shoulders of the God whose shoulders were made for it. And the result, Proverbs promises, is that your thoughts shall be established, settled, stable, clear, oriented. The frantic, circular, anxious thought loops that characterize a mind that is trying to carry outcomes it was never designed to carry. These quiet down when the act of genuine commitment is real. Not because the circumstances have changed, but because the relationship between you and the circumstances has changed. You are no longer carrying what was never yours to carry. This is one of the most countercultural promises in Proverbs, because modern life relentlessly communicates the message that mental peace is a product of having control, that the anxious mind will be settled when the problems are solved, when the uncertainty is resolved, when the outcomes are secured. But Proverbs reverses the sequence entirely. The peace comes not from controlling outcomes, but from releasing them to the one who actually controls them. Commit and watch the thoughts settle. Lesson 33. The righteous speak fittingly because they think rightly. Proverbs 10:32 says, "The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness." The righteous person knows what is fitting. Not just what is true in the abstract, but what is right and appropriate and genuinely helpful in this specific situation, with this specific person, at this specific moment. This is the highest form of speech wisdom, not merely the knowledge of what is true, but the developed sensitivity to what the moment actually requires. This kind of speech intelligence is not a natural talent, though some people have more natural aptitude for it than others. It is primarily a developed quality that grows from two sources: deep attention to other people and deep attunement to God. The person who has spent years listening carefully, who has trained themselves to actually hear what others are communicating beneath the surface of their words, who has developed the habit of attending to the emotional and relational context of every conversation. This person gradually develops an ear for what is fitting. And the person who has spent years walking closely with God, seeking His wisdom in prayer and His instruction in Scripture, this person's words begin to carry the quality of wisdom that comes from above, which Proverbs describes as pure, peaceable, gentle, and full of mercy and good fruits. The mouth of the wicked, by contrast, speaks frowardness, what is twisted, what is distorted, what turns good things toward bad ends. This is not always loud or obvious. Some of the most perverse speech in human community is quiet, subtle, and carefully packaged, but Proverbs is clear about its origin. It comes from a heart that is not aligned with righteousness. The long-term project of becoming someone whose words are consistently fitting and good is, at its deepest level, the project of becoming genuinely righteous. And that project begins always with the fear of the Lord. Lesson 34. What you sow in your words and deeds will determine what you harvest. Proverbs 22:8 states, "He that soweth iniquity shall reap vanity, and the rod of his anger shall fail." And Proverbs 11:18 adds, "The wicked worketh a deceitful work, but to him that soweth righteousness shall be a sure reward." The agricultural image of sowing and reaping runs throughout biblical wisdom because it communicates something about the moral structure of the universe that is both obvious and easy to forget in the daily pressure of wanting immediate results. The harvest is determined by the seed, always. Without exception, not immediately. The seed must go into the ground, the growing season must run its course, the conditions of soil and rain and sun must play out. But eventually, with the patient certainty of natural law, the harvest comes according to the seed. This means that the choices you are making today, in your speech, in your treatment of others, in your private thoughts and habits, in your professional conduct and your personal relationships, are seeds. Every word spoken in honesty or dishonesty is a seed. Every act of justice or injustice is a seed. Every choice to treat another person with dignity or contempt is a seed. And the harvest of those seeds, though it may not be immediately visible, is coming. With the same certainty that summer follows spring and winter follows autumn, the moral harvest follows the moral seed. This principle carries both a warning and a profound encouragement. The warning is for those who have been sowing iniquity and assuming that because the consequences have not yet arrived, they will not come. They are coming. The encouragement is for those who have been faithfully sowing righteousness in circumstances that have not yet yielded visible fruit, who have been honest when dishonesty would have been advantageous, who have been kind when kindness was not returned, who have kept faith with people and commitments when abandoning them would have been easier. Your seed is in the ground. The sure reward is coming. Lesson 35. The wise store knowledge, like grain against a coming winter. Proverbs 10:14 observes, "Wise men lay up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction." There is a contrast here between two fundamental orientations toward knowledge, accumulation and depletion. The wise person is always building their reserves, adding to their understanding, deepening their insight into human nature and the ways of God, expanding the range of wisdom they can draw on when life makes sudden and demanding withdrawals. The foolish person's mouth is near destruction because it is always outputting without ever inputting, always speaking without ever learning, always expressing opinions without ever updating them, always broadcasting without ever receiving. Laying up knowledge is not merely about intellectual acquisition, it is about the kind of formation that happens when a person consistently positions themselves to learn. It is about the habit of approaching each day, each conversation, each difficulty, and each text with the question, "What can I learn here?" It is about developing the deep humility that is willing to be taught by sources that do not immediately appear to be authoritative or obvious, by experience, by the wisdom of people very different from yourself, by the quiet but consistent testimony of the consequences of various choices you have seen play out in the lives around you. The person who lays up knowledge is never impoverished by circumstances that take away external resources, because what they have accumulated in wisdom cannot be taken. When the crisis comes, and it will come, the person with deep reserves of knowledge and understanding is not left scrambling. They have something to draw on. They have the wisdom of years of careful accumulation to bring to bear on the problem in front of them. This is the investment that Proverbs consistently commends as the wisest of all possible investments, the investment in the knowledge that endures. Lesson 36. The name of God is the strongest refuge available to any human being. Proverbs 18:10 declares, "The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe." In the ancient world, the tower was among the most secure structures available to a community under siege, high enough to provide a vantage point over the surrounding terrain, thick-walled enough to withstand assault, self-contained enough to shelter those inside from the worst that could be brought against it from without. And Proverbs says that the name of the Lord is exactly that. Not metaphorically, not approximately, but in every dimension that security and refuge can carry meaning. The righteous runneth into it. There is urgency and immediacy in the image, not a leisurely walk, not a considered stroll toward the tower after exhausting all other options, but a run. The reflex of the righteous person when danger comes is to run immediately toward the Lord, not after trying everything else, not as a last resort when human options have all failed. But first, instinctively, with the full speed of a heart that has learned through experience and faith exactly where safety lives. What does it mean to run to the name of the Lord? It means turning to God in prayer before turning to anything else. It means anchoring your identity in His declaration of who you are before the world's voices get to weigh in. It means trusting His character, His faithfulness, His wisdom, His goodness, His power, as the foundational reality against which every threatening circumstance is measured and found, ultimately, to be finite. Every problem you face has a ceiling. The name of the Lord has none. Run to the tower. Lesson 37. Everything that endures is built on wisdom. Proverbs 24:3-4 says, "Through wisdom is a house builded, and by understanding it is established. And by knowledge shall the chambers be filled with all precious and pleasant riches." This is a verse that speaks simultaneously to the literal and the metaphorical, to the actual building of homes and to the broader human enterprise of constructing anything meant to endure. Whether the house in question is a family, a marriage, a business, a ministry, a community, a legacy, the building materials that Proverbs specifies are not capital or talent or connections or even hard work, though all of these have their place. The building materials of whatever is meant to last are wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. A house built on wisdom is established by understanding, by the kind of deep comprehension of how things actually work, how people actually function, how relationships are actually sustained, that comes only from genuine wisdom applied honestly to real experience. This is not theoretical knowledge. It is the kind of practical, lived understanding that turns principles into practices and convictions into habits. The chambers are filled by knowledge, by the accumulation over time of the specific concrete wisdom that each domain of human endeavor requires for its flourishing. Think about whatever it is you are building in this season of your life. What are the foundational materials? Are you building with the wisdom that comes from God, the wisdom that begins with the fear of the Lord, that is informed by His word, that seeks His counsel and remains open to His correction? Or are you building with the more readily available but far less durable materials of clever strategy, impressive talent, and sheer force of will? Both kinds of builders will produce something, but only one kind will produce something that lasts. Lesson 38. Whoever covers their sin will not prosper. Proverbs 28:13 states, "He that covereth his sins shall not prosper, but whoso confesseth and forsaketh them shall have mercy." This is one of Proverbs' most direct and most important statements about the relationship between honesty about sin and the possibility of genuine flourishing. The covering of sin, the concealing, the denial, the management of perception to prevent the truth of one's failures from coming to light, does not produce safety. It produces a stagnation that Proverbs describes as the absence of prosperity, a condition in which the person exists without moving genuinely forward, trapped by what they are hiding. This connects directly to the theme of honesty in speech and thought that runs throughout the book. Wisdom requires a comprehensive commitment to truth, not just in what you say to others, but in what you are willing to say to yourself and to God about the actual condition of your own heart and behavior. The self-deception involved in covering sin is among the most dangerous forms of self-deception, precisely because it touches the deepest and most formative level of the interior life. When you are not honest about your failures, you cannot genuinely address them. When you cannot address them, they continue to shape your choices and your character from beneath the surface of consciousness. They do their work in the dark. Confession and forsaking, the willingness to name the sin honestly and then to turn from it with genuine commitment. These are the path to mercy, not the path to perfection, and not a guarantee of immediate relief from consequences, but the path to the mercy that actually enables genuine change, genuine growth, and genuine forward movement in the direction of wisdom. Honesty about failure is not weakness. It is the bravery from which all genuine healing begins. Lesson 39. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life. Proverbs 10:11 says, "The mouth of a righteous man is a well of life, but violence covereth the mouth of the wicked." A well of life. Think about what a well represented in the ancient world. Not the decorative garden feature of a modern landscape, but the essential infrastructure of survival in an arid land. A well was where you went when you were dying of thirst. It was the resource that made sustained life in a difficult environment possible. Communities formed around wells. Journeys were planned in relation to them. The person who knew where the wells were held knowledge of incalculable practical value. And Proverbs says that the mouth of the righteous person is this, a well of life. A source to which others can come when they are spiritually, emotionally, or practically depleted, and find something that genuinely refreshes and sustains them. This is not a metaphor for the person who simply says nice things. It is a description of someone whose words carry genuine substance, genuine truth, genuine life-giving wisdom, because those words are flowing from a heart that has been consistently filled at the source, from a person who has drunk deeply themselves from the well of God's word and God's wisdom, and who therefore has something real to offer when others come thirsty. The violence that covers the mouth of the wicked is a picture of speech that closes off access, that destroys rather than nourishes, that makes the landscape more dangerous rather than more livable. These two kinds of speech could not be more different in their effects on the communities in which they operate. One is a well, the other is a weapon. Which are you? Lesson 40. The fear of the Lord is both the beginning and the end of all true wisdom. And so we arrive at the 40th lesson, the lesson that brings every preceding thread together, that draws the great arc of Proverbs wisdom back to the single point from which it began. Proverbs 9:10 states, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding." We began here, and we end here, not because Proverbs has failed to move beyond this point, but because every point it has moved to has circled back to this one with the persistent, patient insistence of a truth that refuses to be escaped. All 40 of the lessons we have explored today are, at their deepest level, expressions of a single reality: what a life looks like when it is genuinely ordered around the fear of God. To guard your heart is to fear God enough to protect the inner dwelling place that He inhabits. To tame your tongue is to fear God enough to take seriously the power He placed in your mouth and the accountability that comes with it. To receive correction is to fear God more than you fear the discomfort of being wrong. To walk with the wise is to fear God enough to choose your companions by His standard rather than by mere personal comfort. To be generous is to fear God enough to trust His economy over your own. To confess sin is to fear God enough to prefer the honesty that He sees over the concealment that manages human perception. Every dimension of wisdom that Proverbs explores, every sharp secret about the mastery of the mind and the tongue, every practical instruction about the choices that make a life flourish or fail, is rooted in this one soil: the fear of the Lord. Remove that root, and the wisdom becomes mere technique, useful perhaps for a season, but lacking the spiritual substance that gives it lasting power and meaning. Preserve that root, tend it carefully, let it go deep, and everything that grows from it will carry the quality of something eternal. The book of Proverbs does not conclude by congratulating you on your journey through its pages. It concludes by returning you to the beginning, inviting you to make the beginning more real in your life than it was before you started. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It is also the ongoing foundation of it, the constant renewal of it, and the eternal consummation of it. Every day you live in genuine reverence before God is a day you are living wisely. Every choice you make in the light of His truth is a choice that is building something that will endure. Master your mind by filling it consistently with His wisdom. Tame your tongue by letting it be governed by His truth. Walk in the fear of the Lord, and watch the 40 secrets of Proverbs become not merely lessons you have heard, but a life you are actually living. What a journey through the book of Proverbs this has been. 40 lessons, 40 sharp, searching, life-giving truths drawn from one of the greatest repositories of divine wisdom ever placed in human hands. We have walked from the foundation of the fear of the Lord through the intricacies of speech and the disciplines of thought, through the power of generosity and the danger of pride, through the beauty of a word fitly spoken and the devastation of a reckless tongue, through the formation of character and the deep structure of a life built on something that will not move. This is not entertainment. This is not information. This is an invitation, a standing, urgent, genuinely loving invitation from the God who made you to live the kind of life that these truths make possible. Do not allow what you have heard today to remain simply heard. The great danger of exposure to wisdom, the danger that Proverbs itself names with uncomfortable directness in its opening chapters, is the danger of being a hearer who is not a doer, of gaining the knowledge of the good without ever paying the cost of its practice. The mirror has been held up. The reflection is honest. The only question that remains is what you will do with what you have seen. take one lesson. Just one. To begin with. The one that landed most deeply, the one that resonated most strongly with whatever God is working in you in this particular season of your life. Carry it with you into the week ahead. Let it be the lens through which you read the conversations and the choices and the moments that come your way. Apply it in the next difficult conversation, in the next impulse toward careless speech, in the next moment when pride rises or the fear of man speaks louder than the fear of God. And when you have worked with that one lesson until it has genuinely begun to take root, go back and take another. This is how wisdom is built, one truth at a time, one choice at a time, one faithful day at a time. Proverbs 3:13-18 says, "Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, and the man that getteth understanding. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her." May that happiness, not the shallow, circumstance-dependent happiness of things going your way, but the deep-rooted, unshakable happiness of a life genuinely built on the wisdom of God, may that happiness be yours, fully, increasingly, abundantly yours. If this video has spoken to you today, if even one of these 40 lessons has landed somewhere real, if something has stirred in your spirit, or shifted in your understanding, or challenged you in a way you know you needed to be challenged, then please do not keep it to yourself. Share this video, send it to someone who needs the wisdom of Proverbs in their life right now. Share it with a friend who is navigating a difficult season, a family member who is struggling with the weight of hard choices, a colleague who you know is searching for something more substantial than what the world is offering them. You never know whose life a single video might change, and you have the power, with one simple act of sharing, to put this message in front of someone who needs it desperately. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already done so, and turn on notifications so that you are always the first to know when new content is published. What is coming on this channel is something worth showing up for. More deep explorations of Scripture's greatest wisdom books, more lessons that will challenge and strengthen and renew your faith, more of this community gathering together around the living Word of God. Click that notification bell. Like this video. Let the platform know that this kind of content matters to you, because that is how it reaches more people who need it. And if you are part of this community, if you have been walking with this channel for a while and these videos have become part of how you study the Word, consider becoming a channel member. Your membership is not just a subscription, it is a partnership. It is a way of saying that you believe in what we are building here and that you want to be part of building it. Come join us. Let us go deeper together. To everyone watching, wherever in the world you are, whatever you are carrying into this day, whatever challenges are waiting for you on the other side of this video, go with the confidence of someone who has been reminded today that the wisdom of God is not distant, it is not theoretical, it is not reserved for the especially qualified or the spiritually advanced. It is here, it is available. It has been calling out in the streets for thousands of years, and it is calling out to you right now. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you His peace. Go well, go wisely, and God bless you richly.